Romans chapter 12 and verse number 18. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Right? This is kind of the theme verse for the entire series of Sunday school lessons that we're doing right now. And so, but God's desire for us is not, right, constant conflict, chaos, right, fighting, right, all that kind of stuff. That is certainly not God's desire for us. God's desire for us, right, is that we would be able to live at peace with other people. And so, it's kind of right. It's like a kid, right, showing his parents, his mom, his dad, right, a drawing, right. The dad telling the kid, right, the house is crooked, sun's too big, stick people don't have necks, right. What's that kid going to do, right? That kid's going to quickly tuck that thing behind his back, right, and not show it, right? It's going to be embarrassed about it. And that's how we feel sometimes when we have to deal with critical people. We live in a hypercritical world, and even as adults, right, sitting in this room, when you deal with critical people, right, it still bugs you, right? Especially when those people are somebody who maybe you respect in some way or have some kind of authority in your life. Right? It's difficult sometimes to deal with those types of people, right? And so we live in a world with constant criticism, right? And that kind of criticism eventually will crush. It crushes courage. It'll crush creativity too, right? It crushes your spirit, right? When somebody is hypercritical of you. Some of you in this room may have been, right? Maybe you're a hypercritical person, right? Maybe that's what, right, marks kind of your life, is whatever the situation is, no matter how good it is, you can always find what's wrong with it, right? And so, it's a dangerous thing though, really, to be critical, right? All of us face critical people. They are people who are relentless fault finders, right? And some people don't look at it that way. Some people who are hypercritical, you know how they look at it? This is my spiritual gift. It's my spiritual gift to correct the body of Christ and keep it in line, right? And right, and so it is my spiritual gift to tell you what is wrong with you, so that way you can be right with God, right? I mean, honestly, there are people, right, on the face of this planet. I'm sure that none of them are sitting in this room, but there are people, right, on the face of this planet that really feel that way, right? And so, but as followers of Christ, right, we're called not to be those people, right? You will not find anywhere in Scripture where being a critical person is looked at as a virtue, right? The other thing you won't find, right, is the concept that you just don't have to deal with people who are critical. Right? You're going to have to deal with people who are critical, but you should deal with them in a Christ-like way, right? In the way that would best reflect Christ in your life and reflect Christ to those people, right? And so, right, first you have to kind of understand, right, the power of criticism. Take your Bible, look at Proverbs chapter 15 real quick. Proverbs chapter 15, and I forgot my computer and stuff at home. It was a bit of a chaotic morning, so you're going to have to look it up in your own Bible. Read it with your own two eyes, right? So, But Proverbs chapter 15, verse number 1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Right? Grievous words are legitimately a part of life, right? People, you are not going to make it through life without being offended at some point, right? And you're not going to make it through life without offending people, but we ought not be the people who go out of our way, obviously, to do that. Not all criticism is the same, right? There's constructive criticism, right? Criticism which the goal of which is to build up the other individual, right? That is what constructive criticism is. May sting still, but it's helpful, right? The best way to look at constructive criticism is probably in light of like a coach, right? On whether it's on the football field or the baseball diamond or the hockey rink, right, or the basketball court, right? But that coach looks at a player and says, hey, right, that was your guy. Right, it's your fault that, right, that play happened. It's your fault that play broke down, right? And here's what you did, right? You, right, you weren't watching, right to the left. You weren't, you overplayed the ball, right, whatever. Is that coach trying to tell that player that they suck and they should never get on a basketball court, baseball diamond, football field, hockey rink ever again? No, right? He's trying to say, hey, look, at next time, here's what you need to do to correct the situation, right? That's constructive criticism, right? There is constructive criticism in life, right? You can offer constructive criticism. You can take constructive criticism from other people. Not everything that anybody ever says to you to correct you is just hypercritical and, right, they're just a critical person. I don't have to listen to them because they're horrible, right? No, some people are legitimately trying to help you. Right? They're trying to help you be a better person. They're trying to help you be a better Christian, right? Constructive criticism is a positive thing. But obviously on the other side of that spectrum is destructive criticism, right? Criticism that has no aim to help. If all you can do is find the problem, but you have no solution to the problem, you are a destructive critic. This is the reason that in business, right? In business, a business leader will tell you, don't bring me a problem if you don't have a solution. Right? If you don't have a solution to the problem, don't bring up the problem because you're not even sure it's a problem. Because if there's no solution, is it a problem? No. If there's no solution to it, it may just be a reality, not a problem. Now you say, well, I'm not smart enough. My gift is not solutions. My gift is finding the problem. Finding a problem isn't a gift. Everybody can find problems. You're not special, sunshine. Right? And so, right, there is destructive criticism. The Bible tells you here, right? Well, in Proverbs, if you go back just a couple chapters, look at Proverbs chapter 12, look at verse number 18. There is that speaketh like the piercing of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. Some people have piercing speech, right? Shouldn't be us. Hopefully it's not us, right? Hopefully it's not you. But some people that you deal with in life, that's, right? They can cut you quick. Especially in the more intimate the relationship, the easier it is for the individual to cut you with their words. Right? If you're sitting in this room and you're in a relationship, right? You've got a husband, you've got a wife. Nobody can cut you like your husband or your wife can. Other people can tell you, you know what? You suck. And, you should work harder, right, or whatever. And you're like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like, you don't know me. But let your husband or your wife say it to you, right? Somebody can walk in your house as a lady, right, from out that you don't know and tell you, well, right, that you're not keeping up with your house well enough. And it will, right, it might upset you, but let your husband say it to you, right? What do you do all day? Just sit around, eat bonbons, right? What are you doing? Just sitting around doing nothing all day, watching YouTube, right? That cuts, right? And so there are people, right? And we ought to be careful that it's not us, right? As the famous poet Ice Cube once said, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? And so, but right, you should be careful about your speech, especially with the more intimate the relationship that you're having a conversation with, the more intimate the relationship in which you have to offer criticism, the more careful that your speech should be. Doesn't mean that you should lie to the person, doesn't mean that you should not tell them the truth, but it does mean that you should be very careful about the tone, the attitude in which you present the truth to that person. If you're a parent sitting in this room, right, other people can tell you that they think you suck as a parent and it really doesn't bother you. You're like, yeah, whatever, right? But let your kid tell you, right? Well, you don't know what you're doing, and you ruined my whole life because, you didn't let me eat jelly beans whenever I wanted to. And right, it may be stupid, and what your kid is saying to you may be dumb, but it cuts, pierces like a sword. The Bible tells you, right? And so we ought to be careful, right? You got to be careful about your speech. Jesus, in Scripture, right? Matthew chapter 16, verse 23, Jesus rebukes Peter, right? Tells him, but he turned and said unto Peter, get thee behind me, Satan, thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Right? Was Jesus just being critical? Right? Was he just finding fault with what Peter was saying? No, Christ was trying to correct Peter, right? And Christ had enough invested in the relationship to be able to say that to Peter. And rather than Peter taking that as an offense, Peter takes it as what? As a correction, a loving correction from, right? Because we know later, right, that Peter is repentant about that stuff. Right? It's because of that, right, that Christ can say, lovest thou me more than these? Right? You've got to have a lot of love invested in a relationship to offer criticism. If you're not willing to invest the affection and the compassion into the relationship, then keep your opinion to yourself. Because you don't have enough banked with that person to offer your opinion. You don't have enough invested to be able to offer your opinion. Whether it's to a parent, whether it's to a spouse, whether it's to a coworker, right? Another believer, you got to have something invested with that person if you want to offer criticism. All right? Christ had enough invested, obviously, right? Words give life, or words can take life away, the Bible tells you. You're in Proverbs right there. Go back over to your right a bit, right? Proverbs chapter 18. Look at verse number 21. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse number 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Right? Your tongue can kill somebody, or your tongue can build somebody up, right? It can give somebody life. This is probably a horrible example, but I'm going to use it anyways. Last year during the playoffs, right? The coach for the Florida Panthers, right? They were having a bad game, right? And that's Maurice Richards is his name. It's a coach for the Florida Panthers. He lit the entire bench up. I mean, he called them everything but white, right? Right? He cussed a blue streak after the game. In one of the interviews, one of the reporters said something to him about all the profanity that he'd used, and he said, "I just felt like they could use a little cussing in their life, right?" But right, he had enough invested with that team that turned the tide. They won the Stanley Cup. Right? He wasn't just being critical. Right? He was saying what he felt like needed to be said to give those guys life again. Criticism can give people life. But just as easy as it can give them life, it can take life away from them. Right? And so you have to be careful about how you're presenting the criticism that you're giving, right? Listen, it's perfectly fine to speak the truth, but truth has to be spoke with love and humility. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15 tells you, right? But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. The Bible tells you it's fine. Truth is not the problem. Here's what if you're a hypercritical person and you criticize people all the time, and then, right, they get mad at you, right, and you're kind of on the outs with people all the time because you're such a critical person, here's what you tell yourself in your head to try to justify what you do. You say, well, all I'm doing is speaking the truth. I'm just telling them the truth. Truth isn't the problem. The problem isn't that you spoke the truth. The problem is that you don't have love and compassion, and so the truth means nothing to the person to whom you're speaking it. Because truth has to be coupled with love and compassion. Truth without love and compassion is brutal. I mean, it's brutal, right? That's why the Bible tells you love covers a multitude of sins, right? Listen, every person sitting in here, you can think of a time when you were corrected by somebody and it helped you to be a better person. They loved you enough to confront you about something. And every single person sitting in here can also think of a time when you were corrected by somebody and it did absolutely nothing except for ruin a relationship because of the way that they did it. Right? So we ought to be careful about it. How do you deal with critical people? This will be a fun one, right? Let's take your Bible, go to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, and we're going to read a couple of verses there from the first part of Matthew chapter 7. Verse number 1, right? Most famous verse in the whole Bible, used by every person that doesn't believe the Bible. Judge not that ye be not judged, right? For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. Why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but consider not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, then shalt thou see clearly to cast the mote out of thy brother's eye. Right? So how do you deal with people who are hypercritical? First of all, examine yourself. Ask yourself this question. Is it possible that what they're saying is correct? I know that's a tough one to ask yourself, right? But he says, what's the first thing you ought to do in this passage? He says, first of all, get the beam out of your own eye, right? So first of all, before you say, you're just being critical, stop and ask yourself whether their criticism is accurate. Right? Listen, don't let their critical spirit provoke you, right, to responding incorrectly. Let their critical spirit provoke you to examine yourself. Most of us only examine ourselves when we are upset that somebody examined us. Right? So somebody comes to you and says, you know what? You're just really loud and obnoxious. And it's at that point that you begin to examine yourself, right? And most of the time, our examination of ourselves is done poorly because instead of examining ourselves to figure out what they're saying, if what they're saying is true, we examine ourselves to justify why we are what they said we are. Justification is evidence that what the criticism that was offered is accurate and you're just unwilling to deal with it. All right, so we justify ourselves by saying, well, it's just because of the family that I was raised in. It's just because of the way that they act. It's just because they're so quiet. It's just because they act like this and they act like that. It's because of everybody else around me that I am the way that I am, right? That justification means you are what they said. Now you got to address whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, right? Listen, this is tough stuff to deal with. It's tough to examine yourself, right? Because when you examine yourself, you got to start peeling back layers that you've built up to keep other people from getting to who you really are. And those layers actually keep you from getting to who you are too. There's a lot of us sitting in this room that you couldn't, if you're asked about certain things and certain topics, you have a really hard time telling people what your actual opinion about it is because you've built up all these layers to this onion, right, to keep people from actually knowing who you are and actually seeing who you are. And you can't even think of your own opinion on most things anymore because you're playing a part. You're acting out a role that you have created for yourself rather than just being, right, being able to say, yeah, you know what, like this is my opinion on that. I could be wrong, right? But you ought to examine yourself first, right? Ask yourself this. When somebody criticizes you, right, and you're reacting, are you responding from a place of wisdom, or are you just reacting to the pain that was caused by what they said? Every criticism causes pain. Every criticism causes pain. But you can choose your response to that pain. Right? Listen, it's very easy to spot the speck in somebody else's eye. right? Every person sitting in here can see the speck in somebody else's eye. What's amazing about how our ability to see the speck in somebody else's eye is that we can see around the log in our own eye to see it. Right? We are not blinded by the forest in our own that is in front of us. We can see perfectly their problem. Right? Isn't it amazing? We all know every solution to everybody's problem, right? You can listen to the news or whatever. We all know how to fix the United States, don't we? I can tell you this. Get two guys that like politics around each other for about 30 minutes. They can fix every problem in the world. Right? None of them will work, but they can fix them all. Right? Listen, that's the way we're geared that way. But we ought to be careful, right? You do have to set some emotional boundaries, right? You need to set those, though. Don't set boundaries when you're upset at somebody. Because let me tell you what happens with boundaries. When you're upset at somebody and you set boundaries, you know what they are? Ultimatums. You know what ultimatums get you? Ultimately nothing. All right? When you get mad at somebody, you go, well, you know what? That's fine. Just don't ever talk to me again. Right? Genius. You set a great boundary. Way to bring your A game. Right? It's not going to work out like you think it is. Jesus answers critics in several different passages, right? Mark 2, Luke 11, right? But you know what you never find Christ doing? Christ never internalizes their vitriol, right? Their point. He never spits back at them what they're given to him. Right? They come to Jesus, they say, hey, well, Moses said, what do you say? Right? Jesus doesn't say, wow, you bunch of morons. All right? Listen, that's not the response of Christ. Because the Bible tells you, right, a soft answer turns away wrath, which is where we started, but that quiet answer will diffuse people. In fact, there are times when Christ doesn't answer the question at all. You know that there are some criticisms that people lay out for you that you don't have to respond to. You don't actually have to respond to every criticism somebody lays out. You don't have to justify yourself all the time. You don't have to present your argument, your case, right, in opposition to whatever it is that they said about you. You know what you can do? You can just walk away. Just, right? You don't have, hey, listen, I know it's harder and harder to do because we all are keyboard warriors now, right? And anytime that we read something that we're offended by, we feel like we have to respond to it, because if we don't respond to it, who's going to respond to it? And if nobody responds to it, those people online are going to think that they know what they're talking about, and I need to make sure they know that they don't know what they're talking about, right? But listen, the reality is you've never changed somebody's mind about you by how great your justification of what you did was. Right? Sometimes silence is the best thing. When you can't be silent, at least, right, offer a soft word. Luke 23, verse 9, the Bible tells you, then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing, right? That's Christ standing before Pilate. Pilate's coming at Christ, right, with all these questions about who you say you are and who they say you are and who are you really, right? What does Christ say? Nothing. Right? You know what the best, if you don't need to respond, why would you respond? Right? But the best way to deal with that kind of criticism often, listen, a soft answer if you got to answer. Right? If you don't answer at all. Because the best thing that you can remember is this, that your identity is determined by your relationship with Christ, not with others. I told somebody earlier this week concerning a situation, right? That, listen, you can say whatever you want about me. You can say whatever you want, right, about my wife, about our family. You can say whatever you want, right? But you're not going to convince me, right, that we're the most evil people on the face of this planet, right? Because what you think of me is not where I've drawn my identity from, right? First and foremost, I draw my identity from Christ. But beyond that, right, listen, I've raised lots of kids, that I received no compensation for. They've slept on my couch. They've slept in my kids' beds, right? Lots of kids have come through my house, right, that I received no compensation for, besides the ones that we've adopted, right? I have, right, others probably would have thrown the towel in and left Riverside because of the church split and all the garbage that went on with that, right? I just chose to stick it out, right? Not because, right, like, well, I'll show you I'm a good person, right? It has nothing to do with that, right? Just, it wasn't in me to just throw the towel in and walk away, right? Like, you're not going to convince me that, well, yeah, you guys are just bad and evil and everything you do is wrong, and, right? You're just not going to convince me of it, right? I don't have to respond to you. I don't have to lay out my case to you about all the reasons why, right? I'm laying out my case to me, right? When you find your identity in Christ, right, then your identity isn't determined by what people do or what people say about you, right? I'm what he says I am. Listen, Galatians chapter 1 verse 10 says, "For do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ." Listen, that ultimately is where you want to make it to as a believer, right? That's my goal, right? I'm not perfect at it, right? People say things about me, people criticize me, right? And I want to respond to it, and I often do, right? And do it in the wrong fashion, in the wrong way, right? But ultimately, the goal is what? I'm not here to please men. I'm here to please Christ. I'm his servant, not your servant. Not here to serve you, I'm here to serve him, right? Part of my serving him is serving you. But if you don't like the way that I'm serving you, that's going to be between you and my boss, not you and me. Right? Listen, how do you respond with humility without compromising truth, right? The Bible tells us this. First of all, don't return fire for fire, right? Proverbs 26, verse number 4, he tells us, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be like unto him." Right? I know you want to mirror their actions and respond to them the same way that they're acting towards you, but it's not going to accomplish the goal that you think it's going to accomplish. Right? Here's the way that it was put to me by all my coaches when I played hockey. Right? It's always going to be the guy that retaliates that gets the penalty. It'll never be the guy that initiates. Right? It's always going to be the guy that retaliates. Right? Well, he did it first. And? Right? If you're a parent sitting in this room, right, you got more than one kid, you have heard those words more than one time over the course of your life, right? He did it first. It wasn't me. It's his fault. I was just doing it. He did it to me first. Right? Did that change your mind? Did you suddenly go, oh, well, I had no idea. You're completely justified. You're innocent. Go on along. Let me deal with them. Never worked, did it? You said what? Well, idiot. Why would you act the same way they acted then? All right? Listen, it's the same thing in dealing with people, right? You can't mirror their tone. Our job is to mirror Christ, not others. So when somebody does something right, acts in a way that is not justified, they say something that they should not say, they act towards me in an Christ-like fashion, my job is to do what? Is to mirror Christ back to them. Act like Christ would act. That's what my job is to do. That's what our job is to do, right? Listen, it's kind of like, right, the story that's told about the lady, right, in church services, right, who she was too loud, a little too expressive in the way that she chose to worship, right? And she says, listen, I'm sorry if my joy bothers you, but God's done too much for me to stay silent. Right? I'm sorry if the way that I serve Christ bothers you, but I'm not serving you. Right? I've said it before, right? People often come to church and then they leave, right? And right, we've probably all done it, right? But you leave and you say to yourself, well, you know, that service really just didn't do much for me today. right? Shocker, we weren't here for you. We're all supposed to be here for him, right? We sing for him. Our hearts are turned towards him, not you. We're not here to try to make the church something that makes you happy. We want to make the church something that makes him happy, right? Practice, right? For lack of a better way of putting it, right? Pre-decided grace, right? Make up your mind before the conflict even arrives how you're going to respond to it. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 9 says this, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that ye are thereunto called, that ye should inherit a blessing. Pre-decided grace, right? Basically just means this, right? Don't let other people decide what your response should be. So I have not necessarily pre-decided grace, but I've had a corner on this thing for a long time as far as, right? It's always blown my mind how I can get under people's skin. Right? When I was a teenager, it always blew my mind that adults would lose their minds about like things that I did. Right? Like it has always just blown my mind, like that you can't control yourself. That you have to yell, you have to scream, you have to lose your mind, like, right? That's always blown my mind, right? That I can get to you like that, right? I've always been kind of a shock jock kind of kid, right? Say stuff just for the effect and see what people will do, right? Do things, just to see how people will respond to it. Like that's always, right? I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it's, right? Right, it's always kind of been in my makeup. It's always been the way that I've been as a person, right? Like, why would you allow other people? So here's somebody comes in with this criticism of you, right? And you're so upset that they think that their opinion should matter to you, that you respond to them as though their opinion mattered to you. Does that make any sense? You know how to deal with difficult people who are hypercritical? The best thing that you can do, right, is to not let them get to you. Even when they are getting to you, right? There are times when, right, you have to put on as though they're not getting to you. And then you get in the car and you'd let your wife or your husband know just exactly what you think about that person, right? And so, right, I understand that. Ultimately, right, the goal, though, is don't let people get to you. Decide how you're going to respond before it ever arrives, before it ever comes up. So that way, your response, you are responding and not reacting. Reaction is rarely correct. Response is almost always correct. There's a big difference between the two, by the way, right? Listen, criticism does not define you. What somebody says about you, their criticism of you should not define you. It definitely shouldn't define you to you. This will blow your mind. Not everybody's going to find you attractive. I know, it's shocking, right? Not everybody's going to find you attractive. Not everybody's going to find you intelligent. Not everybody's going to find you witty. Not everybody's going to find you funny, even though you think you're the funniest person on the face of the planet. Brian thinks he is the funniest person to ever live. And Ariana agrees with him, and we don't know why. Right? But, right? Not everybody's going to think you're funny. But on the other side of it, not everybody thinks you're ugly. Not everybody thinks you're stupid. Not everybody thinks that you're boring. Right? So have a balanced view of what it really is. Right? When somebody comes to you and tells you, well, you know what, I don't think that you're this. Okay. They're entitled to their opinion. Right? but their opinion doesn't make them right. And so you can take it and just go, hey, you know what? Whatever. Right? But don't let it define you. Don't let people's criticism of you derail you. Can you imagine all of the things, all of the great commodities, right? All of the great things that we have in our present day society that we would not have if people had listened to their critics. You really think Thomas Edison never had a critic? The guy had, what was it, something like 150 something failures before he got the light bulb right? You think nobody ever said, hey, genius, 100 times. At some point, you should probably throw the towel in here. It's not going to work. But it does now. Listen, Elon Musk with the electric car, right? Everybody said it's going to cost X amount to make electric cars. You can't make them for less than this. Elon Musk came along and said, I bet you I can. And you know what everybody said about Tesla? It's going to go bankrupt. There's no way that he can do it. There's no way you can sell cars for that price and make a profit. And now he's the richest man in the world. If everybody had listened to their critics, we would have nothing that we do have. If you listen to your critics, whatever it is that you can contribute to your family, to society, right, to the world around you, will not happen. So don't let criticism derail you, right? Don't let it pull you off track. And definitely don't let it destroy your testimony for Christ. Don't become somebody who reacts to criticism because it will destroy your testimony. Right? You don't need to do that. Do this, right? Pretty simple, right? I think we've covered it fairly well here, but right? Discern between whether what they're saying is helpful and what's harmful about their criticism. I will tell you this, there is a truth in every criticism. And if you're willing to do the hard work of self-examination, you can find the truth. But the entire criticism isn't true. Right? Somebody comes to you and tells you, well, you know what? You're just not a loving person. You're a hateful person. There's a truth in there. Right? The truth is not that you're hateful. The truth isn't that you're not loving. The truth is, though, that you acted in a way that you probably should not have acted, and you should probably figure out what it is that you said, what it is that you did that made them believe that you were hateful or that you were unloving. And tweak that and correct it so that that is not who you are the next time. Right? Discern between the helpful and the harmful in criticism, right? Respond. Don't react to it, right? Respond to destructive criticism. When somebody is being destructive in their criticism, right, they're really literally, their only goal is to tear you down. Just show some grace. Because what they're telling you is, I'm having a really difficult time. And I don't like my life, and I'm mad at the world. So show them some grace. Right? Say, hey, you know what? They're probably having a rough time. They're probably having a rough go, right? You do sometimes have to set boundaries. It means that you may not be able to hang around with some people as you presently do. Because their criticism, their negative spirit is going to have an effect on you if you continue to hang around with them, right? Be a voice of encouragement to other people. The world is full of critics. Don't be one. Be the person who says, you can do it. Right? Be the person who says, hey, you know what? You look good today. There's a guy, I just started seeing his reels, right? So I assume that he probably just got going. But, right? All he does, he walks around, he's got a GoPro on, right? He just walks around and he says nice things to people, right? And it's amazing the number of people that respond absolutely awful to nice things being said, right? But, right, he'll just, hey, your hair's on point today, right? Hey, I hope you have a great day, man. Looks like, right, you're on your way to a business meeting. I hope this is the best business meeting, right, ever, right? And it's amazing that some people will respond to that, right, with, keep it to yourself, and stuff. It's awesome, right? But, right, like, there's always, right, a few people, obviously, most people respond positively to positive, right, things, right? Listen, be somebody you're a positive person. You will never go wrong looking at somebody and telling them, hey, right, you look good today. You're never going to say that to the wrong person, right? Listen, you did a great job, right? Have you ever been in line at the grocery store and everybody in front of you is acting like they're losing their mind because it's taking too long? The lady, right, that's trying to check people out, she's pulling her hair out, right? Everybody's talking about, well, I don't know why they don't just open up more things. I mean, we're all just standing around here waiting, and right? And everybody's losing their mind, right? Never hurts to be the guy that gets up there and goes, hey, just so you know, you're doing a great job. Right? Some of these people are just having a bad day. Never hurts, right? Be somebody who encourages other people. Right? I've said, right, it's tough to do sometimes, but as a parent, right, you should not send your kid to school right after you yelled at them all, right? Get up, get dressed. What's wrong with you? Can't you get in the car? Get in the car. Let's go. We're late. What's wrong? You did nothing right this morning, right? Hope you have a good day at school. Do you look forward to being the teacher on the other end of that? Right? Do you look forward to being the teacher on the other end of that? Right? I get it. Kids can make you lose your mind sometimes, right? But you got to do your best, man, to send them off with some positivity, man. Right? Be the positive person in the world around you. Listen, you may not ever change the critic, but you can let God use the critic to change you to be like him. That critic is your opportunity to present a Christ-like spirit.